Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast. We teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, developing your skills, your habits, your network, and more. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Hayslip, and today we are talking with Elben Shira, software engineer at Airtable. I've known Elben since college. He graduated from UT with a computer science degree, had a million awesome internships at big companies like Square during his time in college, and really he's one of the most knowledgeable software engineers I've ever met. He helped me get my first job as a software engineer. And today we're talking about all the things that you're interested in, what it means to enjoy coding, what it means to fall in love with smaller problems, how to become a software engineer, computer science degrees, boot camps, what it means to be a great junior, all the things that you should be curious about. You can learn from Elben, who has been and is a staff level software engineer, which means he's just the smartest of the smartest. So hope you enjoy our time with Elben. All right, Elben, man, thanks so much for being on the podcast. You know, the transitioning from not recording to recording is always awkward, but I wanted to kind of reiterate for the listeners why I had you on and a little bit about who you are from my perspective. Then I would love to get an intro from you. In my mind, you know, I think of one, we went to college together, kind of. I didn't go to UT. I guess you went to UT, but we know each other from college ministry. And I just always remember, if I think of my mind back in the day when I graduated college with a religious studies degree, then I had like this subset of friends who, you know, got computer science degrees. And I always felt this like FOMO of like, man, I could have done something like that. And you've been, you know, an amazing engineer, I think, through the years. We kind of overlapped a little bit. You might even help me get my first job, I think, as a software engineer when we worked together.
I don't remember if I recruited you or not. It's been a while, but yeah.
I think I remember you because at the time, let's see, it was me, Ben. I feel like there's someone else too, and you got like the referral fee or something from me. And then I think we made you take us to lunch. We're like, you don't have to. That's right. Yeah. You don't have to share it, but you have to buy lunch.
Right. No kickbacks involved whatsoever. Yeah. Except lunch.
Yeah, man. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. But I've got tons of questions for you about just I think your opinions are what matter here, right? To our listeners, I think where they probably want to be is honestly in a position like yours, where you've had like this steady career as a software engineer. You obviously love programming, and I want to get into some of like the cool things that you've done. I remember you trending on, maybe it was like Hacker News at one point about startups in Austin. So I want to get into that too. But man, would you just start telling me a little bit about your journey of how did you become a software engineer? I know it started with a computer science degree at UT here in Austin, but what led you to even like want to consider this as like a career?
Yeah, I don't really think I've ever really considered software engineering as a career, at least when I was younger. It was just one of those things where, you know, I think I was the type of person that when I gained interest in something, I would go pretty deep into it. And so programming was one of those things where I discovered on accident, honestly. I don't know how far back we want to go, but it's something I discovered, you can write code to make changes to a source code of a game and the game will change. And that was a mind-blowing...
what game? Like, yeah, what year was this?
Man. So I think I was in junior high and I had an old like Windows 3.1 machine in my room that came loaded up with some, you know, like 2D games like Snake that was written in QBasic. And so you could double click on the tile, if I remember, it would load up the game, or you could open the file in a text editor and it would show you the source code. And that's when I realized, if you like edit things, that things will change, and I can, you know, make the game faster or like make the points higher if I change the constant, right, and the number of points you get for each apple you eat. So I just started learning how each command worked, kind of on the help. There was a help menu in this QBasic text editor, awesome, essentially, or IDE, and I learned what each command did, you know, and started from there. Took computer science classes in high school also. I thought I kind of knew everything, but when I got in there, I realized I knew nothing, and you know, I had to learn everything from scratch.
You mean from just like playing around with games? You thought you knew everything from that?
Yeah, I played around with. I would edit the source code of the games, and then got interested in general programming. So I remember our family did a trip to Hong Kong once for a family reunion because most of my family's still in Asia. and we went to a bookstore there, and my mom said, "Okay, everyone, you can buy one book," and I chose a book on JavaScript, thinking it was Java. Like, I didn't know the difference between JavaScript and Java back then, and I just heard older people say Java is the language to know, so I picked up the book and I thought it was Java, but it was JavaScript, and kind of learned things on the side. I tried to learn C++. That was really hard without, as maybe a freshman in high school, that was really hard to do. So I didn't get far, is what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah. That's awesome, though, man. I mean, I think it's so funny because so many folks these days that I talk to complain so much about how difficult it is to learn how to code. But here you are, like, learning from books or just like editing source code. So there's got to be some, not misinformation, but I think it's people exaggerate like how difficult it is. I think if there's ever a time where it should be easy, it's now. I think it is just that difficult to learn.
It is extremely difficult to learn. But I think I didn't know what failure was, right? Like, because now we know so much, and we want to get to that expert level. But back then, I had no idea what being an expert was. I was just playing around, and looking back, I realized I didn't know anything, or the stuff I wrote was inconsequential. There was nothing important there, but I didn't know that at the time. I was just having fun and exploring. Yeah.
So that's so interesting. So all right. So from early on in high school, were you continuing to, like, while you're taking computer science classes, were you like still coding as a hobby? Like, what percentage how much of your brain as a kid in high school did programming take up?
How much of my brain? Well, video games took up a lot of my brain. So
okay.
But I was really interested in making games, and not even just the coding side, but the story writing side, the art side, in a sense, the music side. I wanted to make my own RPG, right? As cool. Maybe not every kid, but some kids. And so, I tried to learn how to do sprite design. I play the piano, so I tried to compose music, learn how to compose music a little bit. Again, none of it was good. It was just a kid playing around, right?
Sure.
And so one aspect was learning how to program. So the computer science classes themselves definitely were fun and gave me that grounding, that theoretical grounding of how things should work. But, the toy programs we wrote in there were only interesting from a mental gymnastics or theoretical point of view. Okay. And what I thought was the real work was what I did on the side, was just trying to make this RPG that actually never happened, because I don't think I had enough of the skill sets, to actually finish it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's super important. Even with the folks that we have through our programs, we always talk about having a side project that you don't actually really learn anything until you actually start doing it, right? I mean, you can memorize facts, you can get concepts too, like you can wrap your brain around, how something works on a theoretical level, especially if you can't get in there and feel how it actually works. You're not going to be like manipulating machine code so much. But, when you actually start to have to build something, then it forces you to up your skills, because there's a reason that you would actually learn like the next thing. And it's because, you've got something like a game you're trying to build. You've got some kind of end goal, which I think is super interesting. All right. So at what point did you feel like, what was like the first real thing that you built from scratch? Did it happen during high school, or was it not till college that you actually started making like something useful for something?
Yeah, I don't think it started until college, where I had kind of built enough skill and experience to get through the boring parts faster, right? Because when you're starting from scratch, there's just a lot of stuff you have to get through to get something slightly presentable. I remember one summer, me and a couple of our friends wanted to make another game, but this time it wanted to be like, it was like an educational game, kind of aiming for young elementary school kids, because we thought, we played cool games as a kid, let's make something like that, and kind of a nostalgic thing. And so we decided to focus only on the programming, and another aspect was we wanted to learn Python. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I want to learn Python. What can I build to learn this thing, right? And
Yeah.
toy programs are fine to learn the syntax and like basic constructs, but like you said, to learn the real stuff, to understand how the libraries worked, it's better to build something more meaty. And so, man, what was the name of the game? It was like Coco's Fun Coconut Run or something ridiculous like that. And so it was me, Jason, and Paul. We found a random artist on some forum that wanted to help out. And so
That's awesome.
And so this was definitely from scratch. It was like open a blank text editor, main.py or whatever it was called, and start coding from scratch. We had to learn how to use a 2D graphics library. We had to learn how inputs worked. We had to learn how game loops worked, and like frame buffers, all that stuff, and also the logic behind it, right? Keeping the score and things like that.
Were y'all collaborating using like GitHub or Git or kind of version control, or is this like the first time you learned all those things as well?
So back in my college days, Git was new, and
okay,
I remember convincing a professor to use Git because it wasn't necessarily new, but students weren't using it. And I think I wrote an article about this, about like, we're not teaching people how to use basic tools. I think they do now. I think you learn these basic things in college, and of course in any code academy. But yeah, I remember. I think we used either Git or Mercurial or something like that. One of the newer ones, at least newer back in the day.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I think because oftentimes folks come to us thinking about, should I go back to school and get a computer science degree? I think so often I sort of try and describe that, your experience actually getting a degree can be so variable depending on like your environment, And so like if it sounds like somehow you found Paul and Jason and other guys who were also interested in programming for fun. And I think these kind of projects where like you're having to teach yourself stuff that, because probably they weren't teaching Python, right, at UT in computer science?
There was a Python 101, like a 1 hour class you could take,
okay.
Right? And
yeah,
I remember I also convinced another class to switch to Python. Well, I didn't convince the entire class, but they had written a library for some project. It was in Java, and I thought, I don't want to write this in Java. So I wrote the skeleton framework in Python and kind of just shared it with the class, and I think they used that for a couple of years.
Nice. Yeah, one caveat that you're not going to like me saying is, for the listener, that Elben is a different kind of machine. Like, there's not every computer science student's going to convince their professors to use different things. So your story is not necessarily repeatable in some ways. I do want to ask you, though, about, like, how did you meet Elben and Paul Jason and Paul, and kind of create like this crew? Because I think that's so important for folks to have like an environment where their friends are also programming and sort of like nerding out on new things and pushing each other.
Oh, that's a crazy story. So it was entirely by accident, to be honest, or fate, perhaps. So we were all in this class, this logic class, but we didn't know each other. Jason and Paul, they go way back, right? They knew each other from elementary school. So there's this study hall and Jester at UT that I would go to once in a while, and they would go to once in a while. And so one night I went in there to study for this logic class, which is kind of known to be a weed out class at UT Computer Science. And I saw them at a table with that book open, the same book. It's like the red book, and so I went up. It's like, oh, we're in the same class. Kind of got to know them a little bit, and then we decided to study together. And yeah, that was the beginning of that friendship. Just because that class was so hard, you kind of had to find your pod, and you kind of had to work through it together. It's one of those classes where you got a 35 out of 100. You were the median.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. I think that's something that it makes career changing difficult, is like whenever you're later on in life, you don't have those kind of opportunities like you have in college to be able to meet other folks and go deep. Maybe like in a boot camp environment, you have some like small version of that, but it's just not the same kind of thing as being able to have those experiences with other people your same age who are kind of in the thick with you.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being harder if you're mid-career, if you have kids, right? I have 2 kids and I'd be another one on the way. So, I mean, yeah. I think it's 100 times harder as mid-career. But the way I like to explain 4 years of college studying CS versus a boot camp or something like that is like, I had a 4-year head start, right? Like if I gave anyone else that was interested and anyone else that could work hard and study and had the time 4 years, but not in a college environment, just like 4 years in the real world, you would catch up, right? So I had 4 years, and that time is, so to me, it's not necessarily the knowledge, but it's just like being forced to learn and having the time and capacity in those 4 years kind of all condensed. So maybe it takes longer in the real world in a sense, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I mean, even listening to your story, because some of this I didn't know. I just haven't ever had a reason to ask you some of these things. But to hear that you were in junior high, playing with programs, like it wasn't a quick experience. Like it was a long haul, and obviously some of that was, if you were 25 years old and had no responsibilities, like a lot of that would have been accelerated quite a bit because you still had to go through school and and all those kinds of things. But I think that's a good point to continue to bring across to folks, is that this, if you're going to do this, you need to be prepared for playing the long game. Like this shouldn't be like a quick transition. Like you really are. There's so much to learn. It's not even just like knowledge, as you said, but it's a skill set. It's a new way of thinking. I want to go into, I would love to just like kind of fast forward through like your timeline a little bit of like, all right, so computer science degree, at some point, I think you probably get an internship, you get hired. Would love to hear a quick snippet about your, experience at Mass Relevant, Spreadfast, whatever it was called before you left, Airtable. And then I've got a few questions I want to ask you about, some things about juniors and boot camps and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, so at what point did you get your first like internship during college?
It's definitely a rite of passage during college, right, to get internships. So it's really easy, to be honest. And maybe that's one advantage of being in a university setting, is all these companies come to you and kind of are trying to recruit you, right? Like the biggest recruiting was computer science, for computer science. So that's definitely a benefit. So I worked for a couple of Austin companies as an intern. I worked for National Instruments for one summer, Bizarre Voice for another. I moonlighted for a one-man startup in Austin because I wanted to learn Ruby on Rails for a summer.
That's awesome.
That didn't work out so well. I didn't really learn Ruby on Rails, but I tried.
You just dealt with startup drama, probably.
No, it was that the founder, he was a great guy. I mean, I really enjoyed working with him, but he wasn't a technical founder, and so he had a contractor that was doing it, and I was trying to learn it from the contractor, and he didn't really have time to, or the desire to kind of mentor me. And so and then I went to San Francisco to intern at Square for one summer. I think I was one of the earliest interns there because they didn't have an intern program, so they had to kind of. It was me and another guy named, I think it was another Paul, a different Paul, was his name. There were a couple interns actually there that summer, and then I also interned for what was previously Mass Relevance.
Okay, I didn't realize you interned there first. How big was Mass Relevance whenever you were an intern?
There were only a couple of developers. So there were 3 founders. 2 were technical founders who kind of started the software or the original idea to begin with. And then Sam Decker, the CEO, joined them, I think a couple of months after. So outside of the 2 technical founders, there was Howard, maybe Michael. I was maybe like the 5th or 6th engineer. Obviously, I was an intern, so yeah,
That's
learning from them.
crazy. I didn't realize that. So how did you meet them? I mean, I'm just personally curious how you came across Hash Relevance.
I mean, again, Sam just blasted an email to the UT computer science program looking for interns, and maybe I was the only one that replied.
Were you interested in startups at that time? Like, were you thinking that you'd want to make a career working at startups or finding a startup? I mean, were you even thinking through that lens?
Yeah, I was definitely interested in startups. At college, we had a 3-day startup program, which is also now, in a bunch of different places that I participated in, kind of saw how that stuff worked. And that was really intriguing to me. And I wanted to, I wanted to be boots on the ground and see and experience what that was like. And I also worked for a couple of larger companies, but I think the first 2 years I worked for larger companies. That's when I kind of pivoted towards startups and realized maybe the large company thing is not for me, at least was not for me back then.
You mean like your internships, like at Square and in some places?
Internships at Bazaar Voice and National Instruments. Those were the two larger ones.
That's right.
Square was around 100 people when I interned there, so it's pretty small still.
Okay, very cool. All right, so then eventually, so you were at Match Relevance for a long time because they got merged with Quora. Spreadfast. That's right when I started. I had like a very short tenureship at Spreadfast for a year. My only real big boy job I've had really. And then so you stuck there until what? Like what caused you to eventually leave that job?
Yeah, so I was there for maybe 8 years, and as you mentioned, 3 different companies because of mergers and acquisitions, and I loved my time there. I felt like I learned a lot, and I was kind of forced to, and that's one thing that I honestly will direct more junior engineers is it's like work for a smaller company because you have a wider breadth of responsibilities and you have to learn more things. To kind of go rant a little bit, if you're a young engineer and you join Fang or a large company, I'm kind of afraid that you get pigeonholed to some specific expertise or some set of tools that is very specific to that company, and you're not really learning the breadth that you should. But what was the original question? Yeah, so I left. Why I left?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point though, because I think a lot of juniors don't necessarily know this, that huge companies, like, they have their own ecosystems, right? Like if there is like a piece of software that doesn't work for them, like there's so like Meta, for example, like that's React, which everyone obviously is familiar with, started because the front end technologies at the time like weren't working for them, so they just like built their own, which is lucky for the rest of the world that React is a bad example because it's open sourced and all that. But many companies have like their own thing that if you don't work here, like it's just not relevant,
Right. Yeah. People at Meta, they're writing Meta PHP, right? It's just like their own set of libraries and everything's own.
Yeah.
Different build systems and things like that.
Yeah. I was just asking like what eventually, because you're at Airtable now, but what caused you to transition from, I think at the time Chorus to Airtable?
Yeah, for me, I think I felt like I was hitting my limits in terms of what I was able to learn and how I was able to grow there. I don't even think it was necessarily technological limits or engineering limits, but more on the different type of problems that you see, whether they're product problems or business problems. And then, I think Spreadfast and Mass Relevance also, like, we had a harder time not finding market fit because obviously it's a successful company, but it definitely felt more like a struggle. And then, when your business is having a hard time, then everything else has a hard time. When your business is doing really well, then a lot of problems just kind of disappear and go away. But at the end of the day, I think it was just feeling like I hit my limit on what I can learn and how I can grow there, and wanted to do something different.
Yeah, that's cool. And I'm always curious, like what drives you these days? Because I think, if I'm real honest about my experience as a software engineer which was very brief. It was this feeling of, okay, I made it here. I'm a software engineer. I'm getting paid to write code. And, relatively speaking, being paid very little, but in comparison to what I was doing before, I was like, oh, great, this is awesome. This is super cush. They've got a trainer at work. They cater Whole Foods. Like, what more could you want? But I had this feeling that I just hit I was so boxed in. Like, if I couldn't write code really well, like, well, what was I doing? And I didn't want to excel at that, right? Like, I wasn't like super excited to go deep on problem solving. But I'm curious, like, for you, like, what has kept you going? Because I think a lot of people might move into, and I guess what I'm thinking of is different paths that you could take as a software engineer. I think a lot of folks eventually move into, like, what's next? Like, I guess management or doing product, like, as your career evolves. When you think about your career and it deepening, like, for you, is it solving harder, bigger, more technical problems? Is it being able to experience something different, like, with a company? You talk about, like, growth. Like, I think, some companies experience 100x growth, and the experience of being a part of that, is probably exhilarating. Yeah. What's the thing that's continuing to drive you?
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends on the month or the year, but okay. I do agree that you should, at least I focus on my strengths, right? So, honestly, I'm not the best coder or the most technical thinker at Airtable. I mean, there's a lot of people that are smarter than me that are technically deeper and have more expertise, and that's fine with me because that's not necessarily something I'm interested in, right? And so now I think myself, I spend a lot more of my time kind of thinking about the product, thinking about how do we build this that helps our company, helps our customers the most, right? And decision making, making trade-offs, understanding and seeing risks before they come and hit you, and helping other people, junior engineers or other people on my team grow, giving them opportunities that, maybe I could do the same job as them, maybe better, maybe worse, but I've done it before 4 or 5 times, so it's better for them to do it than me. So yes, those types of things are more interesting to me. And maybe that leans more managerial. And, I've definitely thought about going on the manager track at Airtable. But after thinking about it, at least for now, I feel like I'm still interested on the technical side. And I'm also not ready to have my days filled with meetings, at least right now.
Yes.
So I decided to kind of put that on hold.
Yeah. No, it's so true, man. I don't think any company is immune to the meeting disease, And I think it's rare. That is one rare piece of being a software engineer is if you don't get it, you can at least have enough latitude to demand that your calendar be relatively free from meetings. So I don't blame you for that.
I think it depends on the type of software engineer that you are and the role that you play, right? Because there are some developers that you need them to have no meetings so that they can write the code, and they can write the code well and do it in a timely manner. You need to, like, defend those people from meetings. And so that's where I come in, me as also a software engineer, but I can take those meetings because that's kind of where perhaps my expertise lies a little bit more, or not even expertise, but what I lean towards or gravitate towards, right? Is like, I don't mind having a meeting with a product manager on another team to talk about the consequences of what we're building, how they would affect them, or vice versa. Like, those things are interesting to me and helps our product, our team, that helps their team, helps our company and everyone, overall.
Yeah, so I think what I hear you saying is even within engineering, you might have an engineer who leans more product focused. You might have an engineer who leans more technical. And like, if you're someone who's more product focused, you can kind of go down that path and help educate the rest of the engineering team on, product direction. Whereas if you're if you want to be, super nerdy, for lack of better terms, then you can basically hopefully have folks like you who can protect their calendars so they can just output, and kind of get lost in what they're working on.
Yeah, exactly. You need to have software engineers in various roles and in various seats, right? You can't just say, okay, the PM only the PM thinks about product.
Right.
Everyone should be working together on that.
Pretty cool, man. All right. Well, I've got a few other kinds of questions to ask you real quick about, your experience. I think you do. You have a great breadth of experience. I think working in small and large companies, fast-growing companies. I don't know what Airtable's doing these days, but I've used Airtable, so it's definitely a more or less of a household name if you're somewhat nerdy. You understand Airtable. But what? So right now, if you were to tell someone, if someone came to you who's 30 years old and said, "Elben, I really want to become a software engineer," what do you think the best avenue? And I'm literally not trying to ask you to say bootcamp, because I don't know. I want to know your perspective. What is the best avenue for someone to become a software engineer today? And do you think? Maybe you not even think it's possible. Maybe you don't think they should. But what would you say?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this.
Or if you had gone and got a different degree and now you wanted to switch, what would you do?
Yeah, it's not an easy path, right? Because for every person trying to change their career or are changing their career, you're competing with a bunch of new grads that have been programming and forced to program for 4 years nonstop. And so, it's hard, but I think you have to find or buy ways to accelerate your growth in some ways, right?
Yeah.
It's knowledge is exponential growth, right? It's going to feel like you're not learning anything at the beginning, but if you can make that initial part faster or easier somehow, I think that's a huge win. And that's, maybe a coding boot camp is that way. You throw money and time and you get better results faster, right?
And that's sort of honestly what I always tell. I've had folks tell me before, okay, sell me on Parsity. Why should I do Parsity? And I'm always, honestly, I give them the answer of I really don't want to sell you on Parsity. I think probably wherever you go, depending on who you are, you can be successful, right? They're just, these days, the curriculum in one boot camp might be better than the curriculum in another, but that's not really what matters anymore. What matters is the fact that you put your life on hold, you took a huge risk, you put a bunch of money up, and sort of like a computer science degree, you force yourself to do this. What are you going to do? You're going to change your major now? Right. You're gonna go do something else. You're in it. So allow that commitment then to drive your actions forward to a point where. And I do think there's probably some steps along the way, you're implying, which is it's hard at first, right? The knowledge exponential. I think that's a great piece of advice, because oftentimes the way we see that is folks learn their first programming language and it's a slog, because you're why in the world am I learning about arrays and functions and objects and what do they have to do with anything? And then you have to learn all of those things first. And then once you do, it's oh, I can put them together now and solve something quasi-real. Or now I have the ability to learn how JavaScript works in context, context of a web server or context of the browser.
Yeah.
And now it starts to come together, but it's this slow flywheel. That's really hard to get started at first. So I think it's really great.
Yeah, if you think about, if let's say I started programming in 7th grade, it took me until sophomore year of college to be able to make a program end to end, right? That's many years of not really knowing what I was doing.
And hopefully all a boot camp is there's no magic. It's literally, and people especially aren't lining up to hire from boot camps. I think that's also a misnomer that somehow go to this boot camp, there's a line of welcoming people wanting to give you money. Mm-hmm. The fact is it's just a program. We're just taking Elben's experience from junior high to high school, and we're trying to condense it down and remove the barriers and just give you the easy path.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, when it comes to working, I'm assuming you've worked with, or probably still work with, a lot of junior developers. Like, I think you would be, I would imagine you're a great mentor when working with this. What does, in your mind, like the best juniors you've worked with, like what do they look like? Where do they come from? What was their experience prior to you working with them? And like, what do they do that sets them apart and where you're like, okay, this person, he or she's going to be a great developer?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it brings back good memories of just like thinking back about some of the best junior developers that I've worked with. And even today.
It wasn't me, but...
Well, to be fair, I never worked with you closely, right? But
that's true.
We did have...
Well, if Jason was on this podcast, he'd be like, nah, it wasn't Aaron.
We had a lot of fun together, though. That's what counts. I mean, I think it's just relentless pursuit of the craft for the craft's sake itself, right? And because you talked about, why do you have to learn about arrays and functions and for loops and all these things? But I was interested in those things for their own sake, right? And I think if you're not, you have to force yourself to become interested in it, right? Like if you're forced to learn some math because of some reason, and like you can make yourself interested, maybe. I don't know if this is true or not, but that's what I try to do, right? Make the topic itself interesting. Agree to yourself beforehand that you will find it interesting, and maybe you will become really interested and just like enjoy that process in itself. Enjoy learning these things that you may not understand why you're learning it right now, and you won't see the bigger picture until later. Yeah.
Practically speaking, how did you see that like come across in the junior engineers you've worked with? Like, what did they do differently?
They were always raising their hands and saying, yes, I'll do this thing, right? So whether it was bugs or like the smallest of features or some giant thing that was way above their ability, like, yeah, I'm gonna, like, let me tackle that, let me do that. And they would come to you with other problems that you did not see. So they're constantly thinking, right? They're reading the code base on their own. That's another big thing, is they're just going out and reading the code base, and kind of soaking it all in and doing things outside of what they were assigned or handed to them, right? Because as you get more senior, and this is what senior engineers are kind of called to, is like, or at least the most senior engineers, when you're talking about principal level or like staff level, it's like, come to the business with the problems and the solutions, right? We're not going to tell you what the problems are anymore because we don't know what the problems are. And I see really good junior engineers doing that, obviously at a much lower scope, not business not business problems, but like, hey, there's this module in this code that I think we can refactor and make it nicer, or hey, it's been really hard to debug this code path because there hasn't been enough logs, so I added a bunch of logs, right? Like even boring things like that, like adding a bunch of logs or understanding how to use Elk better so that your team can search these logs better, right? Like those things. Showing that initiative, and I think that initiative, it has never been faked, right? Like it's not a fake initiative. It was just them being genuinely interested and genuinely passionate about learning and doing these things.
Yeah, I think that's one of like the biggest tricks that we have to try to figure out is like, is it possible can you cultivate that, right? I think you said that, like, can you cultivate interest, like genuine interest? And I think part of it is when I see someone who's learning through a boot camp and they're having a bunch of errors or they can't figure something out, like, what do they try? Because it's almost like you have to go down this path of like random tinkering. You have to like embrace random tinkering for the sake of random tinkering. You just want to figure out like, all right, it does this, but what if I change X? I mean, exactly what you did with that game, right? Like, what if I have no idea what this does, but if I change this little thing over here, this variable, then suddenly the snake moves faster, or now I get more points. You got to like reproduce that little thing in a code base or a company you work at. And I think also something you're getting at here is that a lot of junior developers step into a role and they assume that everything that has come before them, all the code that's been written and everyone who's been there, has done it correctly and knew what they were doing. Where in fact, it's usually crazy flawed, and in fact, like the newer the company, probably the more flawed, or even like the faster the growth, the more flawed, right?
Yeah.
Like if a company suddenly raises a bunch of money and grows really fast, like you can be sure their documentation is crap. Or if a couple founders, I always remembered even at Master Relevance, people joking around that like, Brian had written some kind of shifty Rails code. And it was like always being refactored because, they were building a proof of concept. And so I think that's something important for juniors to understand is like, look, there's a ton of problems. Like there is an unlimited number of problems, and you thinking that you found one, you're probably right. You don't need to give yourself some credit that, and you might even be able to see them more easily than everyone else because you just got here. And they're ignoring the problems because they want to find different ones. And like you're seeing the small ones. So you really do have the autonomy to like speak up about what you see,
No, that's absolutely right. And, we may even know about these problems, right? But we don't have the time or capacity to fix or improve them. But if you have someone that comes in and does that for you, that's a huge win because they're learning stuff. The code base is improving. The business is improving. But yeah, it's absolutely true that no code base is perfect, and you can always improve it.
Awesome, man. I want to ask you, I'm going to ask you for your some parting thoughts here in a minute too, but is there a story that you have like of the biggest mistake you ever made, something crazy you did? I remember I always tell the story of how Jason and I worked at Master Relevance to like refactor streams, for the tweets that came in on mobile. Mm-hmm. And we tested it on every device except for the Windows Phone because the Windows Phone was crap. But who really wanted it was the NFL, and we just had no idea that the NFL was sponsored by Microsoft. And so the only device they were using was the Windows Phone. So they were pretty mad that we didn't test it. That's always my my short tenureship as a software engineer. I have at least one funny story, but yeah, you have anything like that?
I don't know if it's funny, but I have definitely attempted a couple of giant refactors or rewrites at Master Relevance and Spreadfast. Part of it was, arrogance, naivety. Part of it was also like, this thing sucks, and everyone complains that it sucks, and it's annoying every time we work on it. Let's just redo the whole thing. I would say about half of those have failed in a spectacular way, because obviously when you rewrite something, you think you know all the risk, and then you run into some other risk that you didn't think about. And so one was we wanted to rewrite, again, it had to do with streams, but we wanted to rewrite the infrastructure underneath streams and how the service behind it and how the stream data itself was stored in our database, which we were using Cassandra at the time. And so we did this giant rewrite using a new feature in Cassandra, which we should have known. That was a big risk because like we kind of knew that, but we thought like, okay, they released it, so it should be working pretty well. And it turned out to be a disaster. Like our Cassandra cluster got stuck processing things, and things froze everywhere. And we spent maybe 3 to 4 months rewriting this thing and realized, okay, we can't do this. The technology is not ready yet. Let's just wash our hands clean and walk away.
But I love it though, because you didn't get fired. You just took a big risk, and everyone thought that it was a good idea. And
right, and I think
sometimes it happens.
That was also one thing that I really appreciate about my time at Master Relevance and Spreadfast was that the founders and also the managers there like trusted the engineers and gave them the autonomy to take these risks, right? Yeah. And because they themselves did the same thing, right? Like Brian and Eric were always trying out new technologies. We were early in like deploying Kubernetes. We were early in microservices, and took risks using Scala and all these things. So that was an environment that I don't know if it's rare, but it's something that I really appreciate looking back, and something that was a special environment for a young engineer to be a part of.
Yeah, it's awesome, man, and they got you to stick around for a lot longer than a lot of people stick around at companies these days. So I think that's a good lesson for companies to learn. Awesome, man. Okay, well, I don't want to take up any more time. Any parting words of wisdom for folks who are listeners of the podcast? Anything that you would want them to know?
Yeah, I would say this programming and developing and all this stuff is really a craft at the end of the day. It's something that it's like if you think too hard about the career side of it, it's gonna be hard to stay in it, right? It's gonna be hard to continue to enjoy it. And because I know I get into that problem too sometimes, where I'm thinking more about how does this benefit me in my career and all these things.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to just go back and code, which is what I'm able to do right now. Actually, I kind of switch roles a little bit from being a team lead to back to an IC and just doing straight coding. And the past couple of months has been a lot of fun to get my hands dirty again. And I think that's my advice is enjoy that process, right? Like, enjoy learning about arrays. They're intriguing. They're super interesting to me. Maybe they're not interesting to you yet, but like, figure out what makes it tick for you, why it should be interesting to you.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks, Elben. I appreciate taking an hour of your day to be with us here.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that does it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you want to learn more about becoming a software engineer, visit our website, parsity.io. That's parsity.io. I kind of forgot how to spell Parsity for a minute. That is our online code school where you can enroll full-time or part-time as long as you pass the code challenge. So you need to know JavaScript in its entirety in order to be part of Parsity. And if you don't know JavaScript, don't worry, we've got you. We've got a program called Dev30, which is a cohort-based program for learning JavaScript, which focuses on not just developing your skills, but also your habits, your mindset, and your network. Yes, very closely related to what we talk about here on the podcast. So to check that out, go to dev30.xyz. Also, we've got some other links in the show notes for Peter's YouTube channel. Peter's our other co-host. Also a great course that he has launched called Junior to Senior for those of you wanting to up your game as a developer. Well, that is it for today's episode. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, as this episode is coming out the week of Thanksgiving. So enjoy that turkey, y'all.